The dust is yet to settle on a frantic Ashes 2023 as both Australia and England played out a mouth-watering 2-all draw. While England gave it their all, ultimately it was the Aussies who made sure that they retained the holy urn of the Ashes. Controversies, plenty of talking point, and yet no real winner. Hello and a warm welcome to this edition of WION Podcast. I'm Aditya Pimpale, and joining me today once again is Aditya Sahay as we recap the Ashes 2023. So Aditya, hope you are doing well, and here we are once again sitting and we are recapping the Ashes. Plenty of controversies, plenty of talking points, but what we have seen is that the Holy Grail is undisturbed. Australia have retained it, but it has ended in a stalemate 2-all scoreline. Was it even a fair result to be starting?
Well, I think that was my question also to you. But I think, eventually you can say 2-2 was a fair result, or maybe not also. I'm not really sure about it because the first two matches, Australia were ahead. You can say England made them go ahead also. But in the last three, I think it was England's match in each and every contest. I think they had the upper hand. So that way you can say Australia also survived a scare. It might have been 3-2 in favour of England. Or if the third test match also could have gone either ways. So it could have also been Australia 3-2. But I mean, it was just that kind of a series where no team was dominating for a long period of time. So except the fourth test match where England probably dominated mostly, all the other four test matches were always, there was a pendulum, there was a momentum shift every time. Like in every alternate session, there was a momentum change.
So ultimately what we are trying to say is that the scoreline 2-all, you asked me the question, is it a fair result? I guess it has to be a fair result only because of the fact that both the teams had enough tools in their arsenal to make sure that they just about get over the line. Because I think Australia had a better team in the first two test matches, because what I saw, it wasn't just with the ball, but it was also with the bat as well. Pat Cummins, Nathan Lyon coming out and winning that at Baston test match. But we have seen it, Australia, they had that 2-0 lead, and do you think that they just kind of somehow missed out on breaking that 22-year-old streak where they haven't won an Ashes on English soil since 2001?
Well, I think definitely they missed a trick. I mean, they were 264 for 3 yesterday on the final session, when the final session had resumed in full flow after the rain interruption, and Smith was looking in his element. So I really thought that Australia were going for the kill. It was very good to see them also attacking. They were not going overboard with their attacking approach. Like the way England play, they always bat around 4.5 or 5 per over. Australia was still going at 3.5 or 4. But then you could see with the body language, they were in for a chase. They were not going for a draw. So, and that sudden collapse was out of nowhere. So, I mean, it was total heragiri from Australia, and that is where they lost it, because they had a solid chance yesterday to make it a 3-1 scoreline.
So they could have ended that 22-year-old streak, but there were controversial moments. There were MCC board members who were being suspended after some ill-fated incident in the Lord's Test, but also not to forget the Johnny Bairstow run-out incident, which had sparked rivalry, and just not limited to the players, but also the two PMs as well when they were in one of the summits. So it has taken the world of politics up for the grabs as well. So what was your take on the Johnny Bairstow incident?
Well, I think the Johnny Bairstow incident was pretty straightforward. It was out. It was clearly out, and if you're roaming around outside the crease, you can't assume that you won't be given out in that way. And it was a good decision taken. I'm pretty thankful that they didn't go for a safe decision of ruling him not out, of declaring him not out. So I think that it was pretty good. It was as simple as that. I don't know why the MCC members felt the need to interrupt, and they were also rightly suspended. But I think talking about, there were a lot of controversies, big moments. There were some eye-catching incidents. What is one that tops in your list?
I think there was that Steve Smith run-out incident as well, which happened in this test match because it was
pretty decisive.
It was actually very decisive, because what I saw was Steve Smith. I guess it was the fair decision to be made at the end of the day, because if you have that little bit of doubt, you have to give the benefit of the doubt to the batsman itself in the circumstances it was. But for me, that was a very big incident. And coming back to the Johnny Bairstow incident, I will have my own view you as well. I thought the right decision was being made. It was being backed up by some of the former England players as well. Morgan and Andrew Strauss also coming into Australia's defense that time, that it was reckless from Johnny Bairstow himself. So that was something that sparked the controversies. We have seen it over the years, Shane Warne and Michael Vaughan, they have been controversies in the past as well in the Ashes. But again, it was also part of that selection dilemma that England might have missed a trick. I guess Jimmy Anderson. What do you think about Jimmy Anderson? At the age of 41, was he even fit enough to play 4 test matches? Because I clearly don't see him playing 4 matches in the Ashes.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it was a surprise to me also, given because they have always been very cautious with Anderson playing in such long series. He often misses 1 or 2 games here and there, even if he's in a decent form. But in this Ashes, he was far away from being in a decent phase. He was not bowling that well. He was never threatening. He did not dominate even a single session with the ball, and Australia were playing him with a lot of comfort. I mean, given you had Chris Woakes return and the way he returned from the 3rd test match, I think Anderson was not required after that. It was more of an emotional decision, I feel. Because one predicts, and one might still say that it might be his last Ashes in England, even though he has said that he has no plans to retire. But I think it was more of an emotional decision to just carry on with him, because he looked pretty listless, unlike Anderson.
I think that was something emotional. I still believe that he shouldn't have played the Manchester Test, because that has something to do with what England's approach was, because England were clearly dominating that Manchester Test. Rain played spoilsport, and had Rain not played spoilsport, the result and the outcome could have been completely different. Had they got lethal bowling lineup like Broad, Wood, Woakes, it could have been all different, because Anderson wasn't firing on all cylinders.
Rain also played a part in the final scoreline, because it came in very current situation in the 4th test match and also in the 5th test match. It came twice when Australia were going pretty good in the run chase. On day 4, when it was early stumps, and on day 5 also, because during the Steve Smith-Travis Head partnership, the momentum was in their hand until unless rain came, and then there was a long delay.
I think, there are, I have to be the devil's advocate here, because I have to look at it from England's perspective. Australia going into that final test match knew that they are not going to lose the Ashes, so you don't have that kind of burden. While it was another thing when the Manchester Test was, because England knew they have to win, and there was that sort of pressure that Australia didn't have. So they knew that even if they end up losing the Test match, the circumstances would have been that they would have still lifted the Ashes. So I guess it has got something to do with the thing called as mindset. Australia's mindset was totally different, even though rain did play its part. I will agree with that fact, and I would also agree on the fact that rain also played a huge role in that Manchester Test, and it's some sort of deviated England's attention, and we have to give credit to England anyways, because who knows how circumstances could have been different. But again, you were talking about a couple of players. I fondly remember of Steve Smith and David Warner. You were talking about that.
Yeah, I think they're pretty much in the twilight of their career. It might be that if you're talking about Anderson, you might also say that Steve Smith and David Warner, especially David Warner, considering the form that he has always been away from home, might have played his last Ashes in England. You can't say about Smith. I certainly don't think he has played his last. I think he can still return for another series, because he loves Test cricket, and the way he was batting, he some of his dismissals were pretty unlike Steve Smith, but he was still in form. He was getting some runs. He just got 100. As per his standard, he was not that good. But then I think I can say with a lot of confidence that Warner has certainly played his last Ashes in England. What is your take on that?
I guess Warner just hasn't played his last Ashes away from home, but I also see him being out of away contention, because he wasn't a big hit during the India tour. I guess he had to go back with a concussion incident. He was being reprieved by other batter when he got injured, and I don't think that he is that good enough to play overseas cricket anymore, because he was clearly not at his best, and the numbers game, that clearly tells the story that David Warner is not good enough. And it won't be a big surprise if David Warner just gives up and hangs his boots, because I clearly see that there's not much cricket left in the player who is now 36, and with the ODI World Cup approaching as well, the ODI World Cup might well be his last international stint as well. But then again, the another thing you asked me beforehand was the baseball and traditional cricket. What is that thing?
I think mainly you were telling us about how rain played its part. I think in that point, I'd like to add one thing and also continue with this. That I think Australia did just enough, and they had also luck in their favor to make it a 2-2 scoreline. They were ahead first, and then they lost the momentum entirely in the last half. England was silly and a bit careless in the first half, and the second half the team just kept getting better, and they had that inspiration that they just have to avoid an Australian series win, so that worked in their favor. And then talking about this only brings me to the last point, is that it was an epic series. I mean, it can be compared to the Ashes 2005 also. At that time, it was at least my early days when I was pretty much falling in love with this game, and that just took it to another level. This is also pretty much like that. I would still say I have more connect with 2005 series because we had a result. But then if you talk about this series, it was 2-2, but it was a proper display of cricket. I mean, baseball, England's method versus Australia's traditional and conventional form of cricket. So what is your take on that?
I guess, you are bringing my memories back to 2005 as well. When I saw the 2005 Ashes, it was really, that Australian team, even winning a one match against that Australian team was a very, very big thing. Australia, I remember, won the 2001 Ashes. They were in England in 2005. They were the favorites to win it, and England go on to win it. So that was my memory. I still remember one of those test matches where it went down to the final ball as well. But again, talking of the traditional and the baseball thing, I guess Australia got the formula right. They just about make sure that they neutralized that baseball thing. They had all the tools in their arsenal, and they just flexed their muscles, made sure that England are on the back foot right from the start. Yes, luck factor is another thing that must have come into the play, and more importantly, we mentioned about the 5th test match. Australia didn't have any pressure to lose the Ashes, so that might be one of the reasons why they just tried to open up in that final session yesterday, and which completely went wrong, and England came into the contest. But there will be ways. India found it very hard last year when they were there in England for one of test matches. So and these things will happen. All good things come to an end, and we might just see the end of this baseball thing. It might just be the beginning of the end for the baseball thing. Who never knows? It might just be another just a setback. But again, Australia have got it, and in my opinion, Australia were slightly the better team, but they got luck as well in their armory as well. So your final take on the Ashes. I know that it was one of the best Ashes series you have seen, but if you really had to pick up winner between these two teams, considering that the Anderson thing, considering the Broad thing as well, you really think that the 2-2 result was a fair one?
I think it was a fair one, but the last 3 test match, England were the better side. Australia started in a much better fashion. They also had that World Test Championship final momentum. England were a little rusty. They were also a bit... they did not play the strong side against Ireland in the one-off test match ahead of the Ashes, but they just kept getting better once the 3rd test match started, because they knew they had the back against the wall, and the selection, the playing style also became much more fearless.
Just before we wrap up, there was one certain Stuart Broad who also hanged his boots. He said goodbye to the fair game of cricket, and it has been unfair to him. Yuvraj Singh 6 sixes in an over in 2007. That was actually start of his career, but he ends his career on a high with more than 600 test wickets, and we have seen very less players, very few players like Stuart Broad. So what is your take on illustrious career?
Well, I think I'll keep it very short. He has given us a very good life lesson. I mean, he started his career, it was very early days when he was smacked for 6 sixes by Yuvraj Singh. The poor guy was just taken to the cleaners because of Andrew Flintoff's comment on Yuvraj. But then look at how he has ended it. I mean, with over 600 wickets, being that lethal pair along with Anderson that he has formed. We were expecting Anderson to leave, but it is Broad who left, and he left it on a high, and what a way he did. The last ball he faced, it went for a 6th. He took the last 2 wickets of the Ashes 2023 also. He was the second highest wicket taker of this series. So, I mean, he did everything. He went on a high. He gave us a good life lesson about how to make your career.
Okay, that was Aditya Sahay, and just one lesson, a very, very big lesson. Comeback is always bigger than the setback, and that is what Stuart Broad and the English team has taught us. They were trailing 2-0, they somehow managed to get it 2-all, but this Ashes was really an astonishing affair for all of us as cricket fans. This is the time that we had for this edition of WION Podcast. Join us again next time. You can write into our Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram handles as well, and do make sure to write your scorelines as well. And was it a very fair result in the Ashes 2023? From me and the rest of the team, goodbye and thanks for joining.